Welcome to the Globetrottin'ADs. This podcast is for you, athletic directors, activity coordinators, coaches, and program associates based in international schools around the world. The Globetrottin'ADs is proudly hosted by Nick DeForest from the American International School Vienna and Matt Fleming from the American International School of Budapest. Here they are now, Nick and Matt and the Globetrottin'ADs.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Globetrottin'ADs. We're in episode 20 already for this year, which is hard to believe, but we've made it. It's June. We're heading in the home stretch, almost done with school. We got one more week left here in Budapest and get ready to wrap up for the summer, but we still got a little bit of work to do, and we're happy to have as our special guest today from the World Academy of Sport, Anne Louise Williams. Before we get into learning about the World Academy of Sport and what they can offer for international schools and the tie-ins that are awesome to hear about, I'm going to throw it over to Nick in Vienna.
Yes, thanks, Matt. Yeah, episode 20. This is our last one with a guest for this year. We'll do a wrap-up, but it's always exciting to get into the summer break, I think this year more than ever. But it has been a good, interesting one. So we'll wrap that up in our last episode after this one. But we want to go right to you, Anne Louise. So thank you very much for joining us. Yeah, sharing all the cool things about the World Academy of Sport. Something I absolutely had no idea about until a friend, Chris McCaleb, shared and said, you guys need to talk because there's some great stuff there. So thank Chris at the start and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you both.
Perfect. Well, why don't you just get it started a little bit? I think we hear a bit of an accent, or our viewers will. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you are.
Sure. No problem. No worries. Well, I'm Australian, which is the accent that you're picking up on. I'm currently living here in Switzerland. I've always been really passionate about sport, played a lot of sport growing up as a kid in Australia. And that kind of passion has really pushed me into pursuing a career in the sports industry. So, a bit about me. I went to university and studied like a human movement science degree. I then did a diploma in education to be a physical education teacher. And then I've sort of spent the last sort of 20 years doing lots of different things, a lot in working in commercial sport. So I've worked on lots of major events like Rugby World Cups, Wimbledons, things like that. So in kind of a sports marketing area. And then I also did a bit of work in education. And then about 6 years ago, moved to Switzerland and caught up with a friend who became a colleague who was talking to me about World Academy of Sport, and they were looking for someone who had some commercial and educational interests because they were looking at a new project called Athlete Friendly Education Centres, which is kind of why I'm here and talking to you and Matt today. So my role with WAS at the moment is I'm the now the senior manager on partnerships for our industry pathway. And so I'm happy to talk to you guys about the different aspects of that role and specifically what we're doing to work with schools and in particular the IB at the moment.
Cool. Yeah, pretty interesting path to where you are. That's great. We've had a lot of students on and talk about careers that involve athletics, but you don't need to be an athlete to do. So this is definitely one of them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Very cool melding of different areas that you can do a lot of fun stuff with and make great connections with education and marketing and the business side of things. So very interested to hear about this.
Yeah.
Well, before, you mentioned the IB and your athlete friendly education center, just maybe generally the World Academy of Sport sounds like just such a massive kind of thing. And if you look at your website, there heads of all the sporting bodies are involved, and it's really impressive. So maybe before you dive into like our school specific stuff and the education stuff, just generally what is the World Academy of Sport?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, essentially, our organization is a learning organization. We specialize in sort of creating and developing activities and learning strategies for like a lot of sporting organizations, also governments, major events around the world. So we have a team of about just under 30 people around the world. We have offices here in Switzerland, in Manchester in the UK, Melbourne in Australia, and also in Athens in Greece. And some of the examples of things that we do, so we created and developed the knowledge management and event learning strategies within the Olympic and Paralympic movements. And then also we've done a lot of work in the behind the scenes in developing the coaching programs and strategies with the International Tennis Federation. So that's just a couple of things that we've kind of done sort of outside the work that I do specifically with schools. Right. But yeah, as you said, we work with a lot of different organizations in mainly in sport.
Yeah. So in terms of working with the IB, tell us about the World Academy of Sport, the relationship with the IB and the courses you offer.
Yeah, sure. So in our organization, the work that I do is concentrated on an area called the industry pathway. And in that, we sort of have two sort of different areas. One area is supporting student athletes, and that's in terms of how they can then balance their sport and academics, and that's through our Athlete Friendly Education Centre. And then we also offer a athlete certificate. The relationship that we have with the IB in terms of the Athlete Friendly Education Centre is that through the development of a pilot project with the IB about 5 years ago, we worked with them and created a policy change. So recognised student athletes are able to complete their diploma program and also now their CP program in an extended way. So by adding additional year to their study, so that gives them more time to be able to dedicate to their sport and their academics. So that's sort of one side. That's one part of the relationship that we have with the IB. And on that, we have a dedicated personnel within the IB who works with all of our schools who are athlete-friendly education centres to be able to go through the process of application to do that extension opportunity for athletes. Sorry, Matt, go.
I was gonna say, so sounds like some of the kids you're working with, they have their serious time commitments with their particular sports, like they're training to get to a pretty high level.
Yeah, absolutely. So
probably not in a traditional school setting, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing is instead of we're encouraging student athletes to remain in a sort of traditional school setting, so to speak, so that they're able to not only get that academic opportunity, but also to have to be able to develop friendships and maintain sort of social relationships within school, as well as then pursuing their passion for sport and achieving as much as they possibly can within their chosen sport. So the extended study option is not for everybody. It's really only for a small number of students who kind of believe that they need just that little bit of extra time. But a lot of student athletes that we work with who go to our schools believe that they have the time management skills and the support within their school structures to be able to complete the diploma program or the CP program within the 2 years. So it's only sort of a small number of students that do take up that offer, but a lot of the schools we work with like having that option to be able to offer that to their students and parents.
Sure. Well, I guess not to stress them out, before a big competition or the last needing to go away for a trainings camp because the World Championships won't move around the IB exams, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, a lot of the types of athletes who are on this particular program, they've got very clear goals and strategies and how to achieve those goals. So they're kind of working to 4 or 5 year plans. They're already working within like World Championship cycles or Olympic cycles and things like that. So they by giving them this additional time, it helps them kind of meet both their sporting and their academic goals.
Right. Wow.
Is there like a social emotional component as well in terms of support that you guys offer, or how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So essentially what we're trying to do is we're working directly with schools, with athlete-friendly education centres, specifically with the sort of administration teams. And it's really about this area of development of policies and procedures that create flexible learning pathways for their students. So one area is the extended study. The other areas are things like academic support in terms of managing workloads for the students, creating personalized schedules, but also from a pastoral side, ensuring that they have really good communication structures in place if students need that extra support. Also things like that they have, really clear communication structures between the students, the parents, the teachers, and also the coaches. And we also we want to bring the coaches in, because as important as it is for the school to understand the sporting workloads, it's also equally as important for the coaches to understand the academic workloads of the student athletes.
So you guys kind of help bridge all those groups together, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
We're trying to we're also from our perspective, if you're a student athlete, you've got a lot of work going on. You're trying to train, compete on a sporting side, but from a school side, you're also trying to study, attend class, and things like that. So there's a lot of moving parts when you're a student athlete. So essentially what we're trying to do is work with schools to try and sort of eliminate some of those pressure points and get the schools to kind of take on some of the responsibility for the athletes. And so having things like a dedicated coordinator within a school who kind of works as an advocate for all the student athletes is something that we really try and sort of work with on all of our schools. So it's really trying to do as much as possible for student athletes. And some of the schools that we work with, they all have, each school has different types of resources, because we're working with schools all around the world, and a lot of them look to work with their student athletes in different areas, and we kind of really advocate that. So when we go and work with our schools, we look at what the school is trying to achieve, what's possible within the resources that they have. So from our perspective, when we work with our schools, it's really around a consultative process, and working with them and how in their situation they can best support the athletes that are coming through their school at the time.
Oh, that's great. It's great. Generally I say often that our schools don't produce athletes, but they're our international schools. But there always are these outstanding athletes in them. Matt had an Olympic swimmer last year, and we just had a world-class water skier graduate. So they're there, whether maybe they don't play the sports that we have.
Exactly.
But what is there a level to be one of these athletes that, it can't just be a soccer player that plays regional league, even though he practices a lot. Like, do they have to qualify athletically to be in this kind of program or get these exceptions?
So in terms of to get the special exception to do the extended study option with the IB, the school needs to be able to provide documentation showing that the athlete is on a high performance pathway, and they are tracking towards national selection in their particular sport. But a school itself is able to identify a student athlete as they wish. So a lot of schools identify student athletes depending on the number of training hours that they're doing a week. And once that athlete has been identified, the school, a lot of schools will have a particular policy, which is something that we encourage, that basically outlines, once you've been identified as an athlete, these are the types of this is the type of support that we can provide to you as being an athlete in our school. So it could be that you may only have, one or two really high performing student athletes, but then there's another group of athletes, maybe another 30 or 50 students who are maybe attending, your school, maybe not necessarily performing sports in your sports program, but also, competing externally. And if you put in place some of these types of programs that our schools do, some students who you weren't even aware of will put their hands up and say, actually, I'm training like 13, 15 hours a week at the equestrian centre, 20 minutes down the road, and your school doesn't offer equestrian, so you're not aware of them. But by putting, a type of program together, sometimes a lot of you will actually find more student athletes than you actually realised you had.
Yeah. Well, that's great that you mentioned that. And I think that has to be one of the benefits of becoming an athlete-friendly education center, right? If you get that stamp, then people looking for schools, maybe if they're new to your city or country, they'll go to you first, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we're finding that now. I mean, we've got 32 schools now around the world across about 15 countries. And for a lot of our schools, the process itself of going through the accreditation gives them an opportunity to kind of review their current, policies and procedures, particularly in how that impacts the student athletes within their communities. And it also kind of gives them the opportunity to maybe identify the student athletes like we talked about. Right. Absolutely, there's marketing opportunities for schools if they're looking to potentially market specifically student athletes and wanting to attract those types of students, because generally, schools are always happy to have athletes in their school to help boost morale and recognition and things like that. So there's certainly those sorts of things. And then specifically, for us, with the IB, there's that opportunity to offer that extended study option for student athletes, and being able to offer something new and something different to their students is always very attractive. And then from our perspective, we also work with our schools really hard to provide additional kind of resources and things for them. So, we do a lot of work with working with our existing schools to do things like case studies, to be able to showcase what each of our schools is doing. And because, as I said, each of our schools might do they specialize in something a little bit different to each of them. They're set up differently. Some have academies on site, some work with academies, external or football clubs. And so they all kind of doing essentially the same thing, but maybe a little bit differently. And so it's a really nice thing for us to be able to showcase some of our schools in that way. Cool. And then also we're looking in the last couple of years, we've done a lot of work in actually giving student athletes in our schools more direct engagement with past athletes. So we have a really fantastic relationship with the World Olympians Association. And through that, we now work with around 25 Olympians around the world. And that's given us kind of this opportunity to create more resources, more things for our schools. And so, we do now things like Q&A panels on various topics, which our schools are all invited to. Student athletes can come and listen and ask athletes, and hear athletes tell their story about, things like stress, time management, balancing school, understanding, what you need, like, the things around health and female athletes. We just did one recently on that, which has been really well received. Cool. And also we're doing more things like we're doing a pilot this year where we've given our schools the opportunity to be part of an empowerment coaching program. So, they have a matched up with Olympians, matched up with schools to talk through various topics, and that gives them kind of the student athletes an opportunity to develop sort of more a regular relationship with some of these athletes. So so from our perspective, it's we're always trying to provide more and more things for our schools, because it's something we're really passionate about it. And at the end of the day, it's it's a really important part of our business, and it's something that we see as we've got Olympians who want to give back and they want to do all these types of things. So we're happy to kind of work with them and see what else we can come up with.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fantastic modeling, right? Because you got folks who've been through this process and they they can tell you that, yeah, it's tough, but you can do it. And here's how I did it. And here's strategies you can utilize. So
Absolutely.
That's, one of the things it's always in the back of my mind as athletic director. I know the academic load our IB kids are dealing with in our regular program. And then to be a part of the sports program or the activities program and balance all of that, it can be done for sure. It takes a lot of work and effort. And I think possibly this could be a model of sorts for schools like ours, where we're always stressing these things, but sometimes the blueprint isn't always as you would think it would be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think most of the schools that we work with, they all have the pieces. They all have the pieces, and then when they're working with us, sort of going through the process and looking at the different areas of the framework that we have, it's just about bringing all those pieces together and creating something that's more streamlined. And also it's more, the idea is it's more being proactive rather than reactive. So it's sort of like we have a student athlete coming to our school. Great. This is all the services that we can provide to you. This is what we do as a school. This is how we look after you and support you, rather than sort of like, oh, we've got an athlete. Okay, we've done this before. We've done this before. It's kind of the idea is bringing everything together so that, when you have students coming in or are going through your school, it's very clear, everyone knows, and it's not just the student athlete and the specific teacher, it's the whole school understands this is a program that we're invested in, and this is what we do as a school community to support these student athletes.
So on that idea, as being an athlete-friendly education center, maybe you can just kind of go back to the beginning. Like, what's the process like for becoming one of these and putting this program in place for your school?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, for the schools that we work with, the start of the process, we've developed expression of interest form, which all of our schools complete. And that expression of interest kind of just goes through and provides the school with an opportunity to look at what are the kinds of services and support that we're already providing to our students. So we kind of, within our framework, we have 4 different areas that we're really focusing on. So the first area that we look at is education, curriculum and integration. And that's looking at, from an academic perspective, what kind of support we as a school are providing to student athletes, and how do we identify our athletes and where do they sit in our school? Like, when they come back to school, do they have to sit in a separate classroom? Or are they able to sit with the rest of the class and maintain that social kind of balance as well? We also look at the pastoral care and lifestyle management. So it's looking at, is there specific policies in place which, our student athletes can access in case they, need some additional support? What communication processes are in place? We also look at facilities. It's not necessarily the facilities on site at the school. So we don't go with a checklist and go, do they have a FIFA approved football pitch? Is it a 50-meter Olympic sized swimming pool? It's actually not about that. Great if you've got those resources, amazing. But actually, from our perspective, it's more like, what resources do you have? How are they being utilized? And how far away are the resources that your athletes are needing to travel to? And is the school supporting, like, with transportation to and from facilities if they can and are able to? And also things like the qualifications of the staff who may be overseeing fitness rooms in schools and things like that. And then the last area is slightly linked to facilities. It's around human resources and sport connections. So it's more specifically around the sports side, looking at, what connections maybe you have with external sporting organisations. So a lot of the schools that we work with, they have these relationships with, say, like professional football clubs or swimming clubs, tennis academies, and it's how those relationship works and how that communication is in place. So the expression of interest kind of goes through those 4 different areas and kind of gives us a good feel for what that is. Schools then send that through to us. We have a look at it, potentially have further discussions with the school, ask for some more information, and then we organise an assessment visit. Up until pre-pandemic, face-to-face was what we were doing, but now for the last couple of years we've been doing virtual assessment visits with our with our teams. I mentioned our Olympians before. So we've trained our Olympians to be AFEC assessors. And so we have a team of maybe 3 or 4 people that will go to a school. The school visits are a one-day visit, generally in a school through school hours, and we meet with various teams within the schools to talk about those 4 different areas that I mentioned. Once the visit's done, we have an assessment report that goes to our schools, which is the reflections. We have like about 32 standards that we're reporting against with our transcripts. We give our schools an opportunity to self-reflect as well on their experiences and reflect on the report. That's signed. We have agreements. We also, for schools who are IB schools who are interested in that extended study option, there's a tripartite agreement that the schools have. So that's between the school, the IB, and WAS. And then for the AFEC itself, there's an agreement between WAS and the school. Once that's signed, our schools are then able to participate in our professional development pathway that we've created, as well as have access to some of those resources and things like that I mentioned before in terms of what things schools get out of becoming an athlete-friendly education centre. So, and our agreements, go for about 3 years. And then after that, we have a reaccreditation, which is sort of going back and looking at what changes, what improvements have been made since the school was last accredited. So we've got some of our schools, we've got pretty good retention actually for our schools. So we have a lot of our pilot schools that started with us, 6-7 years ago are still with us. So some of them are going through like their third visits now. So it's so that for us that's great, because we can see that what we're doing has been making a positive impact on the schools, and they're looking to continue and work with us as we grow ourselves on this particular framework.
So with that in mind, and our audience being international folks, international school educators, how much have you worked with international schools in particular?
Well, most of our schools are international schools. So, we work at the moment, as I mentioned, we work across about 15 countries. So we have schools in the US, we have schools through Asia, so through Thailand, Hong Kong, Singapore, and then also in Europe, we have schools here in Switzerland, in the UK, in Denmark, Spain, Jordan, Egypt. We move across a lot of areas. So, which is exactly what we want, because what we're trying to do is, the goal for us is really working on this dual career approach. So giving student athletes this opportunity to continue with their education as well as their sports careers, so that when and if sport is finishes up for them as a professional career, they've got they've got that kind of something else to go back to, and that plan B, and that sort of works continually with them, so they're not having to stop and start between the two. So that's what we're trying to do. So it's a good group of people, good group of schools, and all working sort of in a very similar way.
Is that group growing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started out, when I started out 5 or 6 years ago, we had our pilot schools, of which there was about 18 or so, and now we're sort of up to 32. So, and it's just continually to grow. The other area that if it's okay, I'd really like to mention is that, as well as working with it goes to that question about the IB, as well as working with student athletes, supporting them through their sporting careers. We also work with the IB on for students who are interested in working in the sports industry. And so through that, I mentioned that we have our industry pathway. So we're supporting student athletes, but we're also supporting students interested in a career in sport. And through that, we also work with the IB, in that we're an official career-related study provider. So, and on that, we now work with a university, Federation University, where we're providing a CRS in international sport management. So it works well for our student athletes who are interested in pursuing a career in sport, but it also works well for students who have a passion for sport, who would like to get involved in that particular industry. Right. And because of that project as well with the IB, we're also seeing an increase in schools who are interested in offering both that CRS and international sport management, but also working and supporting student athletes as an AFIC. So it's sort of now working hand in hand together and really kind of increasing our reach and that opportunity for schools to be, working with us in different ways. So we're just finishing our first year actually of a cohort of students doing the CRS, which has been fantastic. So they're just completing their second course. They do three courses, over the 2 years, and they're just completing their second course for that. So our relationship with the IB kind of extends beyond just athlete-friendly education centres. It's also going into this our industry pathway. So our industry pathway starts from now, so high school, and it also goes through to postgraduate as well. So the CRS feeds into a bachelor degree that we have in partnership with Federation University. We also have partnerships with the University of London for a postgraduate certificate in international sport management. So our IB relationship extends beyond just supporting student athletes.
Wow. I'm glad you did bring it up, because it just shows how broad the offerings are, and from the elite athlete to schools that maybe want to attract more people and help their student athletes to then studying beyond. And you mentioned a international sport management is the master's degree program, right? So maybe even some athletic directors that are out there that don't have a master's in international sport management might want to take that, or would they be too old? Yeah.
No. So we have a postgraduate. So it's a postgraduate certificate in international sport management, and actually we do offer that. We have scholarship opportunities for that particular program. So I'd be happy to share some more information about that to you after this, and if you wanted to forward that through to some of your ADs that listen to your podcast. Absolutely. We're happy to. I think there's a new cohort starting in September, and I think applications open even in the next couple of weeks. So timing of your question is impeccable.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's great. No, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Please send that.
Definitely.
And, we'll put that link, and I'll send it out in the newsletter, which will come out shortly after this episode.
Yeah, it sounds like we possibly follow up session later on. Nick had mentioned something about possibly have one of your Olympic athletes join us and kind of go into more detail about the process they've gone through with your program and how it's benefited them. So that there's definitely a lot more into.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the Olympians that we work with, they're really happy to talk about their experiences. I mean, they've achieved amazing things, and they're happy to share their stories. But they're also really keen to pay it forward, to give back, to, encourage the next generation. And that's, for them, for all of them, actually, that's kind of why they got involved in working with us. And it's an absolute privilege to work with these particular people who have achieved so much in the sports world, which, you the two of you, like me, are probably the same, very passionate about your sport. And so any opportunity to have a conversation with these types of people is actually pure joy, to be honest with you. And I love talking to them, like every day when I get a chance to talk to them. I'm like, yep, sure, I'm happy to talk to you. Sure. Tell me about what happened when this happened.
Well, that's exactly why Matt and I are here, and why we love doing the podcast. And it's just great. Lots of great information about the World Academy of Sport. For anyone that's interested, where should they go, and should they write you if they want some more information?
Yeah,
Where's
absolutely.
that?
I mean, they can email me. I'm sure you can provide my details
Yeah.
to everybody. Also, I'd recommend having a look at a couple of websites that we have. So
Okay.
if you are interested in sort of understanding more about our industry pathway and AFEC and the athlete certificate and the PGC and international sport management, then our website is istudy.sport. Is one to have a look at.
Yeah.
And then also specifically if schools are interested in looking at the career-related program or they're authorised and they're looking for a new CRS option, we'd love to talk to you as well. They can have a look. We have a specific website which is called Passion to Profession, and that talks about the CRS and also which then feeds into a Bachelor of International Sport Management as well, which is a degree that can be done online completely. So there is kind of a pathway for students who are interested in pursuing that, and they can move to Australia if they want to, but they can also stay where they are and study online. So I'll leave that to them to make that decision.
Awesome.
Coach Evaluator is the premier coach evaluation software for schools and athletic organizations and preferred coach evaluation solution of the NIAAA and the Positive Coaching Alliance. The system is completely customizable with an always growing evaluation template library for athletic directors to reference. There are not only evaluations for ADs to use, but also self-evaluations and parent-player evaluations of coaches. Learn more about digitizing and simplifying your coach evaluation process by visiting www.coachevaluator.com. Mention Globetrottin'ADs to receive a $200 discount on the yearly rate.
Kukri are a global multi-sport clothing brand specializing in providing the world's most prestigious schools with bespoke-made and designed team uniforms for students of all standards and abilities. If you are frustrated by inconsistent colors, branding, costs, and sizing across your school's uniforms, then it's time to discuss an offering where every sport is available from softball to soccer for male and female athletes at rates to suit your budget. To find out how Kukri could elevate the apparel of your student athletes to a professional level, email the team at contact@kukrisports.com. A dedicated sales manager will offer you a quote today. Mention this ad and receive a special offer on your coach or PE staff order.
And one of the ways we like to wrap up our show is with our guests. We like to ask them a little bit. You told us a little bit about you're from Australia, but now you're located in Switzerland. So if you'd like, maybe you'd like to share a little bit about your favorite thing about being in Switzerland, or what you like, or something that's cool to see. We always encourage our listeners, if they can, to explore and check out one of the places where our guests are coming from. So any insights for you?
Well, I personally love this time of the year. Coming into summer, Switzerland's a great place to live year round. Obviously, you've got winter sports, you've got the summer sports, but where we live, I live in Lausanne, so the Olympic capital of the world. So when we have visitors here, we love to take them down to the Olympic Museum, which is fantastic. Also go paddleboarding down on Lake Le Mans, Lake Geneva. And then also we're very fortunate to have some amazing chocolate factories and cheese factories near us. So we usually take our visitors on a bit of a tour where we take them to the cheese factory to have fondue, and then we go to the chocolate factory and eat lots of chocolate. So and therefore you're ticking all those boxes. You know, you've got the chocolate box of Switzerland ticked off in a day, pretty much, if you could do most of that stuff. So yeah, that's sort of a little trail that we've come up with here, living here. But yeah, it's a very beautiful place, picture postcard pretty much everywhere you look.
There's also a great transportation museum there. I've been
absolutely, yes, in Lucerne. It's amazing.
My son, when he was a kid, was just absolutely bonkers for trains.
Yes.
So everybody out there's got kids who love trains or transportation, all kinds of stuff like that. There's a fantastic museum there.
Yeah, very absolutely.
Cool.
Yes, no, absolutely. We've been there as well. It's amazing if you've got kids. Definitely recommend that for sure.
So.
Well, it's some great stuff to wrap up all the other great stuff before from you in the World Academy of Sport. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing everything you do. And as you could tell, the passion that you have for it is great. And always an organization that's always looking to do more for the people involved in the organization is perfect. It's really, really great. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Until next week, this has been another episode of the Globetrottin' ADs.